Okay. Have you been on the WhatsApp group? And how long have you been on the WhatsApp group? Legendary. We have been discussing this. So I was wondering because I think or I figured a lot of people joined recently, and it seems like they've not been following the contents or the classes on YouTube. Okay. So Legendary. When did you join the WhatsApp group? You can speak, by the way. When did you join the WhatsApp group?
I've been on the ones that for the very long time.
Okay, and have you been joining the classes on YouTube?
Yes, I have little idea about it, but it's not really deep. I just know that they are
Oh,
using it for testing API, something like that.
yeah, okay. It's for testing and developing APIs. Um, that's fine. I'll just do a quick run through before we start. Okay, so I'll do a quick walkthrough before we start. Let's check out the website as well from here. So just hold on a bit. Let's have this different screen, and yep, we have this one on this screen. Okay, give me a second. All right. So that's correct. Postman is used for testing APIs, also used for developing APIs. Let me say Postman website. Let's just say Postman. Okay. All right. So this is the Postman website. This is the official Postman website, and yeah, if you can visit this web page, you can of course download Postman from here. Let me drop it in the chat as well. So Postman is used for building APIs, right? Of course, the building process also involves, you wanting to test, right? You can test your APIs while you're building. You can also test already built APIs with, Postman. You can use it for different things. We'll look at that shortly. Yes, we have desktop applications, that you can actually download, right? Right here, you see Postman is an API platform. I want you to keep that in mind. Postman as a tool, right? We call it an API platform. Let's bring this back here so I write some things here. Okay, so Postman is an API platform. Yeah, when you say something is an API platform, it means we expect, especially with the term here, platform. It means it does like way more than just build, right? You use it for testing, you use it for mocking, right? And there are so many other things you can use it for. So we'll discuss all that in a bit. Let me zoom in here so that this can be very clear. Okay. All right. So it's an API platform for building and using APIs, and Postman simplifies each step of the API lifecycle and streamlines collaboration, so you can create better APIs faster. So yes, there's something called an API lifecycle, and I would definitely, do my best to also, I think it's stoplights. Yeah, I actually want to also go into explaining the API lifecycle using what this tool have put in place, which is called stoplights. Right, so it's used for designing, documenting, and building APIs, and they actually have different solutions for walking through that API lifecycle. So yeah, the video is recorded, of course. Yeah, the video is recorded, of course, and it will be uploaded on YouTube after this call. All right. So we are going to walk through Postman first, and if we have enough time, we can also play around with Stoplight. I will show you how to design APIs, right? Which is one thing that a lot of people don't, tend to talk about, designing APIs. When I'm building APIs, this is the first thing I like to do. I design. right? And then I sometimes, generate what I call, some people would call this a stub, right? Basically, you're generating code. So you're generating kind of like a boilerplate code that's match your API specification, right? And I'll show you what that is. We'll generate a specification file, based on the programming language or framework that we're looking to adopt. There are tools that can help you with, the code generation part, right? You would get to understand what that means. By the way, for those of you that have zero idea what an API is, I'm also going to mention something here. Let me just take it down. API life cycle. For those of you that have zero idea what an API is, okay. So this stands for application programming interface. Okay. So the idea is, we have a lot of applications that are being built. We have a lot of applications that are meant to, communicate with each other. And, one of the ways to ensure that these applications communicate with each other effectively is via APIs, right? So it's a programming interface. Let's show an example here. Say we have application A, and application A happens to be, let's put that down properly. So application A right here happens to be, say we call this a police, let's say Nigerian Police Force API. Okay. This is a weird example, but yeah, let's, I don't know. Will Nigerian Police Force ever have an API? Who knows? But yeah, let's, I almost forgot this is going on YouTube. Okay, so let's assume this is the Nigerian Police Force API. They have an application, and let's say this application is basically for storing the database of, let's just say, criminal activities, right? Activities, and or let's just say storing the records. So it's used for storing the records of activities going on, or investigation activities and investigations in the country. How many of you can see my screen? I can see a message saying, oh yeah, okay, it's your network, which means others can see my screen. Thank you. All right, so this is an API for storing activities and investigations in the country, right? By the police. So we'll call this the NGN Police Force API. And we have application. Yeah, so we have another application, which is application B. And let's say we call this the general public service board. I don't know what that is, but just to give an example, and we say this particular API, aids the individuals or the citizens to publish or post or send information to the police force, which means, one thing about APIs is you give developers the opportunity to build new tools or new applications, given the functionality of these APIs. Now, take a look at this. We have the Nigerian Police Force API, and this is where they store the record of activities and investigations in the country. And then you have the General Public Service Board, where citizens can decide to, use this API to send requests or log records about, activities, maybe a robbery case or something happening in real time somewhere, right? We don't know, but the API is just developed somewhere. Then we have a developer. So let's call our developer. Give me a second, please. Okay. So let's call our developer, let's say Marv, myself, Marv Dev. All right. So Marv Dev wakes up one day and he decides to build a new application. And this is going to be like a mobile application, right? So Marv decides to build a mobile application. And on the mobile application, it calls this, case app, or let's say crime case app. Okay. So, the Nigerian citizens decide to download this application, and whenever they see or hear a case of, crime happening they can simply open this application and, probably just take a picture or make it easy, right? Or the picture can be optional anyways. So they probably just take a photo of, the happenings there, and they can add a description, right? Just to make things easier. So we had a description, okay, of the activity, and then they submit, right? So it's as simple as taking a photo very fast, adding a description, or you can even have an option for, like SOS that can work with location and stuff like that. So SOS, let's just keep that, on one side. Yeah. So this is SOS. This is the submit button right here. This is the description, and then this is the picture, right? So you can literally just take a photo or something, and you put the description right here. So this is what the app looks like. This app, we don't necessarily need to build our own database, in the sense that we already have an API for that. A different company or a different set of people built that already. This is Marv's application. This application here is built by a company called Public Good. That's a publicgood.com. So they built application B for the public, and this application is built by an agency called private private.gov. Yeah. Okay. Now, private.gov, don't necessarily know publicgood.com, right? These are different, people building, different systems here. We have this particular application, and we also have this application. Now, MavDev, via API connection, can decide to build his application in such a way that when somebody reports a case here, MavDev will simply, via an API connection, send this request to the general public, board, or the general public service board. And, when it sends this request, the other API would send a response to say, oh, yeah, we have acknowledged this, we have received it. So what is MavDev submitting at this point? Is submitting the case. New case. Let's call this a new case. And when submitting the new case, of course, MavDev would also include some details, about the user that, sent that information, blah, 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 right? So all those details comes to the General Public Fund Service, or API, and that will be logged on their end, okay? Via API connection, they send a response saying that they've received this, so received. This is, API in action, right? Now, there are other details that would come in here. I would explain further as we proceed, right? I will explain the concept of JSON and some other things. Most of you are probably familiar with this, okay? So what I've been submitted here is a new case, right? That is exactly what Marv has submitted. And Marv got the response that says received. It was successful. If Marv sent a new case and it failed, then probably along the line, say this failed, Marv might have received another message that probably said error, right? So Marv might have received an error, although we'll get to discuss some of these cases very soon. But let's just assume that at this point, we get a success, message that says this was actually successful. Okay. All right. Now, next, the thing about these police guys is from their API inside their office, they actually have, some sort of bell or, alarm. If there's a particular case that is logged, and this case is, let's say this case is an urgent case, right? Something related to, robbery. Let's assume that every type of case that is submitted can have a category. Okay. So let's say we have description right here. Let's call it DESC. That's a description, not to be confused for descending. So let's just leave the full thing. Let's leave the full thing instead, and I'll probably make it small. Oh, it's already small. Okay, let's just reduce it. Okay, I'll reduce it. I don't want people to make a mistake here and assume it means descending. So this is description, and this is let's call this case status. So in this status or category, somebody can select if it's a robbery case, blah blah blah. Although you might be telling yourself, how realistic is this? Yes, I don't really expect this to be so realistic. If there's an actual robbery case, I don't know if you would have the time. If you are there, I don't know if you would want to be. I mean, come on. If your life is super good, you probably don't want to. You probably want to be running, right? So, but yeah, let's just assume we have a case category, and we have someone select the type of case, and the type of cases can fall under maybe a minor case, right? Maybe severe, or let's say critical. Okay. Yeah, so let's say minor and critical. So let's just assume that these are the categories of the cases we have, right? Yeah, this is an assumption, by the way, so keep that in mind. So we have a case category. We are literally building a mobile app here. Anyways, yeah. So we have minor or critical. Now, when the person selects minor and they submit this, right, it's logged here. These guys have no information about that. But then let's say that whenever this case is critical and it gets to the public good page or API, the API will then make another call. And this time they're making a call to the police, API, because they feel it's something that they should involve, the police, right? I'm sure that makes sense to you because, of course, the case is critical, and probably it's important that these guys also get that information. Okay, so if the case is critical, application B sends a request to the police, right? So we can say we just duplicate this. Critical case gets or is sent to the police. All right. So critical cases, yeah, I think that makes sense, are sent to the police. Okay, so when this critical case is sent to the police, they receive this feedback, and of course they do the same thing to acknowledge if there was a failure. They also acknowledge that there was a failure. Right now, let's assume that yes, this case was received by the police, and they also send a response that says we have received this. After receiving this, because it's a critical case, they have a connection to some other service inside the police department right there, that is probably maybe an alarm or something, just to notify them, right? Remember that when you send something to an API, the API probably has a database, right? So they might not get the notification, but then they build an alarm system that tells them we have a critical case and we have to look into that. This is basically how we build interconnected systems. Just keep that in mind, right? So yeah, there is some sort of API connection as well. I mean, this is internal to the police, right? So it's also good to show that we are referring to an internal case here. Let's just, put this guy right here and probably send that to back. So let's say send to back. Good. Okay. So why do I have this in a container is because both services are used by the same department. So it's just a good way to make you understand, the diagram. Now, we've actually said a lot of things, and, while I speak, I'm also drawing this diagram to make sure that, you guys get the big picture here. We are still speaking on API and the fact that we are communicating from one application, right, which is a mobile application in this case, built by a developer, to another application built by a different company called Public Good. And then that application, based on the feedback or the feedback or the request gotten from this mobile app, sends another request to the police application or the police API. Now, remember, in our previous classes, we already discussed databases and all those stuff. So, I don't think it's necessary to always highlight that, but I'm just going to do that for the purpose of this call. So each of these platforms have their DB, right? So just so you have that in mind, right? Each of them have their own DB. What exactly is happening in that DB? The records that you sent into this application has to be stored somewhere. And that somewhere, basically is their database, right? So they store it in their database. They can choose to store it elsewhere, but we're just giving an assumption here to say each of these guys, they are different entities, different businesses, or different government agencies and or bodies, and then they have their own database for storing their own record. Keep that in mind. Now, when Marvelous or when MarvDev, works on this API, all he's doing is send this information to this guy. He is not storing this information. It means that if you come back as a user, you should be able to retrieve all the cases that you've uploaded, and that is if this API is built to work that way. You are able to not just post or create, but also retrieve, right? Now, one thing you must understand is there is a format when sending, when sending a request via these APIs. That format is more like it's based on the contracts that this application and this application, have been built to communicate in, right? So this application might say, oh, what I receive is plain text, or what I receive is JSON, which is called, is also known as JavaScript object notation, right? So JSON is, a very popular option here, and most of you might have seen a JSON object before. You have an application here, and it says when I'm submitting this a particular request, it has to come in form of a JavaScript object notation, right? And then this guy here says, oh, when you are trying to submit a request to me, which is a police application, I prefer to receive this request in form of XML, right? Now that's a different thing here, but most likely if it's a modern application, we are also looking at JSON, JavaScript object notation. We have other, formats. I just mentioned XML. Just keep that in mind, right? We'll get back to that probably in a later class. Now, I want to be sure that you guys are following me here. If you are still following me, drop a message in the chat. Let me, drop a message here. If you are confused at this point, please let me know and ask your question right away. Okay? So we are in the 300 dev days chat. So I think Kenny is typing. If you are still following me, let me know. If you're confused, let me know. Nice. Okay, so who else is following? How many of you do I have on the call? Let's see. Leila, Jamal, B, Promise, Legendary, nice. Samuel, Kobe. All right, I see most of you are actually awesome. Okay. Now, what you've been able to look at here is, how we basically use APIs to communicate among different services or different components. In our own case, these are the components. Right here, we have component 1. Right here, we have component 2. I also love to outline these stuff here so it can be clear enough. So here we have component 1. Let's just drop them here. So we have component 1. Here we have component 2. And right here, we have component 3. Okay. So you see we have 3 components communicating with each other via API connection here. Although we have component 4, but component 4 is internal to the police, right? So they choose how to make that communication happen, eventually. But you get the point. Let's come back to Postman now, and let's try to look at how Postman is meant to be used. Okay. If you download Postman, probably what you will see when you open it for the first time would be the home page right here. Okay. Yes, I have multiple workspaces, as you can see. You can create a new workspace. A workspace is simply a way to organize multiple APIs, multiple collections within a particular space. And then you can invite people into workspaces. So, for example, if you work in any company, you probably want to set up a workspace and invite all your colleagues to that workspace, right? You can click on workspace here, and then you can create a new workspace. I have multiple workspaces, as you can see right here. I don't need to create a new one, right? So I can simply click on some of the previous workspaces I have created, okay? And of course, I can invite folks to join me in my workspace, right? So you can see I have some folks right here in this workspace. Well, if I click on workspace now, I can, simply select one of the previous workspace. Before I do that, API network is simply a place to explore and, see a lot of, someone is asking what is the name of the workspace. Well, so I'm saying you can create your own workspace. This is Postman. Can you see my screen? Someone dropped a message. You can please drop your messages in the 300 Dev Days channel so we can be on the same. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I think Chooks Michael. Okay. What's the name of the workspace? Okay, let me go back to the 300 Dev Days chat. See, I'm actually looking at the chat. So please make sure you drop the message in the 300 Dev Days topic here so that it will be easier to follow. Well, so to take that again, I said a workspace is something that you create, right? On Postman, you create a workspace. Okay? So the point of using a workspace is to better organize your APIs and API collections, so that you and your colleagues can utilize or make use of, I would say, yeah, you and your colleagues can access same set of APIs from a central, from one source. Okay, so I think someone is trying to speak. Yes, who is that? Okay, so if you're just joining, you can mute yourself. All right. So a workspace, let's just say a Postman workspace, right? So the point of having a workspace is to have a proper way to organize your APIs, right? So that if you invite people into that workspace, they can see the set of related APIs you've built inside that workspace. So if you work in an organization like, say, MTN, you will not if you work with MTN and you also work with Airtel, if you are the API lead, you will not be building multiple APIs in the same workspace that people in MTN and Airtel can all see. It has to be properly organized so that you maintain that difference, right? Or you maintain the scope of your API development. Okay, so if you click on API network here, you see we have an option to view all public APIs or all internal APIs. If we have deployed some of our APIs into our internal space, then you can see them here, right? But if you want to view public APIs, you can simply click on this. It shows you a curated list of public APIs. You see we have Zoho APIs, Bold Sign API. Basically, you can search. You can even search for APIs. We have LinkedIn Marketing API. So I can search for, let's say, Paystack. For those of you that know Paystack, let's quickly search for Paystack in the public. You see, this is public, right? Paystack developers. This is public. Okay. We have some other APIs here. If I click on Paystack API, okay, so it said couldn't find this workspace. Let's say view all workspace. I think we should search. Oh, okay. This is probably just okay. Let me go back to view all public APIs. Okay. Let's click on view all. Okay, so I think I need to search again. Let's search again. This time around, I'm searching public API network, and I say Paystack. So we have the Paystack developers right here. This is public. Yeah, this is public, of course. Let's do that again. Deleted. Okay, that's crazy. Let's search for Flutter Wave. Yeah, correct. Flutter Wave. Okay. Flutter Wave developers. Let's click on that. All right. So Flutter Wave API is active right here. I can click on the Flutter Wave API, and you see, we get that API right here, right? For charges, for transactions, for transfers, for beneficiaries. So we really have like some sort of core banking API specification right here. Although this is not core banking, so yeah, but we have like the Flutter Wave 3 V3 API specification that you can get to work with, right? You can get to work with and use. Yeah, so basically you see you are able to get these APIs from the Postman API network. If these companies have their APIs deployed or published on Postman, then yes, you can access those APIs if they are published to be public, right? To be publicly accessible for you and I to utilize. Then yes, you can see it on the API network. Back to Workspace. I'm going to simply click on my workspace right here, which is Marv's workspace. When I click on Marv's workspace, you're going to see a bunch of collections, right? A bunch of API collections right here. You're going to see a couple of things here: collections, APIs, environments, mock servers, monitors, flows, and history. And yeah, on this side, you see we have search. I can invite someone into this workspace by clicking on this, right? What I have here. This is the settings. I can basically, I can basically set up, the details of this workspace, the theme, and a bunch of other information here. I can check the notification that I have here. You have been assigned to Chris's workspace, blah, blah, blah. So these are basically notifications for my profile. I can click on this to see my profile. Of course, I can create new themes as well. I can set up new environments. You see, I have a couple of environments here. I can create even more environments. Okay. And I can simply set up new collections. These are what we call collections, right? So if you take a look at this, I have a book API collection, and I have a request that says fetch all to-dos, right? Anyways, I think this was just a test. Let's go to the 300 dev days. I don't have any item in here. I was expecting to have, oh yeah, I have an API here called book API, and I have requests. So these are basically requests. Create book, a request to create a book with a post verb, right? So this is a post request. Remember, these are the HTTP actions that can be performed on each resource. So when we call it a resource, basically this is an endpoint, right? It's an endpoint, or we can also refer to that as a resource, because if we call this, we're expecting to get a response, and the response should contain some books. Okay. So someone is saying, I can't actually see the screen clearly. Please, someone confirm if it's from my end or if it's from Michael's end. Someone please confirm in the chat. Is it from Michael's end? If it's from Michael's end, then Michael might have to leave the call and join again. All right. So I think Michael, I think it's a network thing. Please, you can leave the call and join again. All right. Okay. And by the way, the call is recorded, so I'm sure you can take a look at this later. But I would advise you leave and join again. All right. So we have this resource. Create book is a resource. Get all books is a resource. When I click on get all book and I call this API, of course, this API is not running at the moment. But if I call this API, we are expected to see a list of books, right? You see we have get book by ID, which is simply going to help us, fetch the book, a single book based on the ID of the book that was passed, right? You see we have update book, we have delete book, we have search book, upload book. So basically these are, the resources or the endpoints that we have created under this collection, which is the book API itself. If we are building a book API right now, we can then configure this to work with that API. So most of us are already familiar with at least a little bit of backend with Node.js, of course, JavaScript and MongoDB. We have shown some of these things in the class. Okay, I will do a quick backend code that we will be able to show you how this works, especially experimenting with Postman. Okay, so yes. That is it for the collections, right? So in order to create a collection, you can simply click on the plus sign here. You see we have create new collection. So I can create a collection. I can say, okay, let's create this from a template, REST API basics, right? We're creating a new collection from a template. And, that collection would include a couple of details, as you can see, REST API basics, CRUD, test and variables. You see we have get, post, update, and delete. And then we have, the explanation of each of these items here, because we created, basically from a template. If we are not using a template, then of course, let's delete this for now. We can just click on plus and click on blank collection. Now we have an empty collection that just says new collection. And of course, we can add a name to that. Let's call that new book API collection. So a collection is simply a way to structure our resources into a folder, so it will be easier for us to of course look through those resources. So if we have a Postman collection here, let's say a collection is simply a way to organize our Postman resources or our API resource, so API resources into a folder. Okay, so of course, in Postman, it's simply referring to like a folder. Okay, you are able to put in new items in here. So I can say add request. I can even add subfolders basically. So add a request, and here's a get request, and we can rename this to like get book, right? Get book. Okay. So you see now that is a get request that gets a book, and we can now put our URL for that here. We'll get to experiment with this shortly. Of course, you can also create a folder, and inside that folder you can add more resources or requests. So inside this folder, let's call this folder let's just say author. Maybe inside our book API collection, we want to be able to create authors and stuff. So we can have create, or let's say get author. So now you see we have get author. We can have create author, and that is inside the folder. Then we can also create another folder called book, and probably put the get book inside there. So it's up to you. You must not structure your APIs this way, but then if you prefer to do that, it's perfect. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Just keep in mind that having a good way to structure your API collections would depend on the team or the person working on the project. It depends on your cognitive load on that project. How much can you remember, right? Or how much can you recall when you are trying to navigate that API specification? If you have it structured, maybe that is when you are able to better understand where to find the endpoints or the resources. If that is the case for you, then yes, do well to arrange your API in a way that works for you. Okay. All right. So that is it for collection. So let's go ahead and take off this collection for now. On this side, you see we have APIs. Although a collection simply references the API, but the point of having APIs here is you can basically create that API definition, and that is what I'll be explaining to you probably on a different call with a tool called Stoplight Studio. So if you take a look at this, for example, I just designed an API for user authentication and login, right? You see I have posts for sign up, I have login right here. So basically this is the code used for designing that. But the reason why I want to teach you how to use Stoplight is because for those of you that probably don't enjoy writing all these lines of YAML code, it looks intimidating already. You probably prefer using something like a form. Then I'll teach you how to use a form like this to create and design your API. I mean, this is interesting. A lot of engineers have trained over the years. They always enjoy doing this, and it's really interesting to design APIs and probably generate the boilerplates you can use for for that API. Okay, so we'll get to that. Maybe not today. I mean, because of time, but we'll get to that. All right, so that is it for API. When we start creating APIs, you would see how interesting this can be. Environments, you can basically set up environments so that if you are working on a project, when you activate that environment, it gives you variables and some other things you've configured for that environment. For example, if I create a new environment here, let's call that environment 300 dev days environment. So 300 dev days EMV, just like this. Can't spell again. Yeah, env. Inside this environment, I can put a variable. We can call this host, and we can set a value. So we can say local host. Let's just put HTTP here without the S. 3000. Okay, so that's the initial value for my host, and so that's what I have for the host. 300 dev days. If I come back to collection, I click on book API. I click on create book. As you can see right now, it says no environment is set up here, right? So if I come in here, let's take off this guy. If I put this and I call this host, by default, if I hover on this, it tells me unresolved variable. This variable is not found. The reason why it's not found is because I have not selected an environment. If I select an environment and I hover now, you see it can find it because I have this specified in that environment. If I take off the environment, and I come back here, it says unresolved variable. This is not found, right? So yeah, that is basically how you use environments, and we're going to be exploring this so we can put in some vital things into the environment when we are testing things like tokens, things like hosts, things like ports, right, and stuff like that. Well, I think, yeah, that is it. That is it for environment. We'll get back to that when we have something hands-on. Mock servers. We can create mock servers for our APIs and basically for our team to test, even though we don't have the actual server implemented. This is just to test run, maybe from the front end. The front end can connect to a mock server and play around with the API, even though the development of the actual API is not completed. This is just going to mock our API and have clients, which are like mobile application developers, building the mobile apps, and the web application developers building the web front end. They can simply connect to the mock server and, of course, kind of like simulate what they expect to see when the production API is ready. Okay, so they can play with that, connect with that, use that mock server while they are building their interfaces. When they are done, they connect to the real thing and they expect to get the same behavior. Okay, so monitors basically used for monitoring, APIs, especially, you can use this for monitoring your mock servers, for monitoring your development environments or staging environments, just to understand, what the requests, going in looks like, right? If there are errors, I mean, if there are failures, or if everything is fine, then I think you can use that for monitoring that API. We have flows. These are basically ways to connect your APIs, to additional actions, right? I mean, flows is very good, but a lot of people don't really pay attention to flows just yet. At least from my experience working with Postman. But the thing is, you can set up new flows, set up triggers. This is basically a no-code interface here, and you can basically set up like triggers, and of course connect those triggers and the response from those triggers to even other triggers, right? Other actions. I believe this is going to be a great interface to set up API connectivity and the actions based on the results of those actions. Although this is not popularly adopted just yet, at least in my experience and in the space I have worked in. But yeah, I have experimented with this, and I also urge you to experiment with this when you can. We have history, which basically shows like the history of requests you've made, right? This is just a simple request I made today. I believe today, not today. This is June 18. So this has been, of course, a long time already. Yeah, so you can basically experiment with this. Check out some of the old API calls and tests you've done right here in the history section. Well, so that is it. This was an extensive, about 40 minutes of Postman. 40, I don't think that's up to 40 minutes. Let's say about 30 minutes of API explanation and, Postman overview. Let's close all these tabs for now, and let's quickly build a simple API with Node.js and test run with Postman. All right, so someone is saying good evening. Yes, Aliu, good evening. If you have any questions, do well to ask in the chat there. I can see your message. All right, so what we are going to do right now is write some code. Let's write some code. Let's just call our application. Okay, yeah. Let's try to mock what we've done here, right? We have two APIs, and we have a mobile app, which I would just say it's a client, right? A simple client, okay? Yeah, so let's try to build this, and we are building this in real time. So yes, you're going to get to see some errors, which is fine. It's going to be an Express.js application. So what I'm going to do on one side is, just try to create a boilerplate for myself real quick. So let's just say it's going to be an Express.js, application. Let me go ahead and go to the desktop. I think I have a folder called 300 dev days, and within Node.js, or I can simply say API development class. Okay, so let's go into that folder. Let's make a new folder here called the MGN police API service. Okay, and another one called what do we call that? Let's check again. This is the General Public Service Board, okay? So make directory general public service board service board. Okay, so let's start by going into the ngn police API service. I will say npm init -y, and I would simply open this up in VS Code after we've initialized npm in this project. Okay, so right here we're going to install Express. So this is the light theme. Most of you don't like light theme, so let's switch to dark theme. Color theme, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file. I think I'll rather use the default instead. Can I get the default dark modern blah blah blah? Okay, I think this is fine, even though it's not the default. Yeah, this file, I need to rename this to server.js. So this is our server right here. Let's just use, just one place here for our tests. So we're going to install npm. Let's go back to the terminal real quick. Put this on one side and put this on the other side. Okay, so let's clear. Expand this a bit. I'll say npm install express, right? Because that is what we are going to be using for our simple tests, right? And okay, let's see. All right. Okay, so in here, I'm just going to create a folder. Let's call that our source folder. And inside the source folder, I'm going to create a file called, let's say, route.js. Maybe I can create another folder. I like to structure this properly. I call this modules, and inside modules I can have auths, or let's just call this requests. I don't know, let's call this case. Yeah, case. Okay, so inside case I'm going to have routes right here, move. I'm also going to add a couple of things here like git ignore, so that we can at least see this properly, but that's not necessary anyways. I just want to have like a file. It can be a readme file anyway. So we have case, we have route, and I'm also going to create what I call controller, right? Just those two. I can have a third one, which is my model for my database related stuff. Ideally, I usually call that a repository or data, right? I rather call it a repository, just like this. Okay, and yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter. A lot of people prefer to put it in the model as well. I like having my model separately because I use the model to basically address Mongo, let's say address MongoDB schemas, all right? And then I have the repository for creating the database actions. Although you probably don't want to do this in a very simple example, but it's a good way to structure your code. And if you're working on different code base or modules, it makes sense that you structure it in such a way that you can easily detach an entire module and it won't affect any other file. This is how I love to code, right? Especially when I'm building APIs. So the routes for the cases or the case actions. Just putting some comments there to make it easier for us to understand. So controller functions for the case actions. All right. And right inside the server.js file here, I'm going to start by saying const express equals require. I already installed express, by the way. So I can also say const. What do I need to bring in here? Maybe .env. Although I haven't installed that just yet. .env. Okay. Configure. I think is it config or what? Probably just config. I can't even recall, but yeah, I'll check that. And next, I am going to say const app equals express. Okay. And then I can also, I can simply say app.use. I think I can say express.json. Is that correct? I think, yeah, express.json so that I can, get to use JSON objects. Okay. So I'm just going to test a very simple one here. I'm going to say app.get. I'm sure I can do that, right? App.get. Let me see. Just trying to be sure here. So if I have app express, oh right, okay. All right, so yeah, that should be my router. So I can say const router equals express, all right, equals app.router. Let me see. Sure that should work. So here I can say router.get. Just to test the first one, I would say get request response. Yeah, I think that's correct. So response.send hello world. All right, I'm going to run this. I mean, if I have an error, by the way, I am yet to even configure the application itself. So I need to say, yeah, I need to basically put in the code that would run this. So I can simply have app.listing, listing ports. So this is why I put in my port. So it can be 3000. Okay, but I need to be very sure because I can't. Let's simply go straight to the Express documentation or Express.js. You can just grab the document. You can just grab the boilerplate from there, which is what I do all the time because we have a lot of frameworks and no one expects you to remember every single thing. All right, so we have that loading. So yes, you can just go to getting started, hello world, and from here and get that. So yes, it's app.listing, and I simply did not need to put in the router right there. So I see this wasn't very necessary. Okay, so I can simply say app.get, app.listing. So I think this was correct. Let me go back here. Yeah, I have to use the arrow function. Okay, and of course I have to close it right here as well. All right, so here I can just say console.log. Our application is running on ports. Just to define the ports that we have our application running on. So let's put this here. I can specify in here. I can just specify the exact port that our application is listening on. So let's put this and say ports. All right, so I'm going to say ports. Here I would say const ports equals 3000. So if I have this in a .env file, so I can say .env port equals 3000, just like this. So why do we use env? So that we call it an environment file, so we can configure some important things there and just we can simply bring it in from here. So .env.config, I believe so. And here we can just say process.env.ports. Now this would basically get the ports from the .env file, which is our environment configuration right there. Okay, so let's see what we have here. If I just say npm install.env, because we are yet to install it. All right, so that is going to install.env. Someone said, how do you know the exact port to listen to? Well, you don't necessarily need to know the exact port to listen to. You can configure whichever port you want. It can be 3001, 3002. I use 3000 because it's kind of like a standard for a lot of developers, so that it's kind of familiar to them. It can be 5000, 7000, 8000, whatever ports that you can use, so long your computer, can basically aid you listing on that port, it's fine, right? I can choose to use 5122, but some standard conventions will be 3000, 5000, 3001. If you have like 10 applications running on a server, you can listen on multiple ports, 3001 to 3010, right? That's up to you. Right now I'm using 5000. That is fine. Okay. So if I say node server.js, let's see if we have an error. Okay, we don't have an error. It says our application is running on this port. which means if I go to the browser and I simply listen on localhost 5000, just like we have specified, we expect to get hello world, right? We can change this just to see if it works properly. Application is live. Okay. By the way, this is a boilerplate, so don't forget that. So our application is live. Let's go ahead and run this again, and we can see our application is live. Now, the thing is, before I am able to make changes, so I said our application is live on ports. Probably I want to include that port here, so I can have something like this port, but then it means I have to move this maybe somewhere around here, and I want to use a template literal instead. All right, so when I save this now, our application is not restarted, so if I should run this again, it's still the same thing, and this might lead you to wanting to use something called nodemon, because nodemon is going to automatically refresh your application, so it gives you that hot reload. If I want to use nodemon, I would have to install nodemon as a global dependency on my machine. I already have it installed though, so I don't need to do that again here. So I can run my application with nodemon server.js. Now it says our application is running. Let's refresh. If I should make any change, and I say our application is running on, I save, you see this refreshes automatically once I save, Control S, and now you see that is changing without having to refresh again and again and again. So yeah, we have our application running right now on port 5000, and this is one application, of course. So what I might want to do here is first I probably want to go into a different file and sort of create a router. So inside the route here, I can simply say const express, or I can say router. Let's call it case router equals require express, and I say dot router. Okay. All right. So I am simply bringing in express dot router here. So I can also bring in the controller that I want to use. The controller is what will be triggered, right? So let's just say exports dots. Let's call what do we call this? Okay, let's just use const submit case equals. I think that should work, right? So I can say request response, and yeah, just like this. So I can say module.exports equals submit case. I'll probably want to put this, yeah, not compulsory, but this works, right? I can also choose to export directly just like this without having to put this, but let's keep it this way. This is fine, so that if you have like get case, you can also do this, right? So you see, I'm able to separate all these things, and I can just have get case here. So it's kind of smooth, a very smooth way to write code. And of course, I can write some things here by saying this is a comment. I say yeah, so I can add a description. So this is the controller to submit case requests from clients. Okay. And okay, so this is the NGN Police API service. I think we're probably doing the wrong thing already. So for the API service, oh yeah, we're still submitting a case, but now it's coming from application B. So what we are doing is fine. What we're doing is still fine. Let's come back to our code. All right. So all we need for now is just one. It's just one of these. So I don't need to keep two, just to submit the case. And in here, I'm simply going to say response case submitted. Although we have not submitted the case yet, we're just trying to model this to see if it even works, right? So case submitted, we say response.send because we're sending a response. This is response. So you can choose to write it like this, request, if that is what you prefer. But a lot of people will probably prefer to follow a standard that the industry already follows, or a lot of developers are already familiar with. You can make this asynchronous if you want this to be an asynchronous function, right? So here we have that controller, and we're exporting that controller here because we want to have a route, right? We want to have a route file that we can use to work with that controller. So first, let's go ahead and we'll say const. Let's say we have the case or submit case. We're trying to import that function. So we'll say require, and then we can have a controller here. So you see we have that submit case. We have been able to import it in here, right? So at this point, we can now say we are working with a router. So we'll call that the case router. Case router dot post, because this is going to be a post, right? It's going to be a post. So we can say case submit, okay? Or we can just do /case. And right here, we can then bring in the submit case, which is this guy. So this is our router to submit case. So we just created our router, or let's say our resource for submitting the case. Okay. Now this is just the path to the resource, basically. Let's call it our resource path, because when you call this is basically what you are calling here, which is the controller function, right? So you can see this is the controller function. Although now that we have added this, we have to export the route itself, because this is what we now have to put into server.js, so server.js can recognize it in the first place. So we simply can say module.export, we can say case router. All right, now with this, we now have our route, and the route speaks to the controller. We have not configured model, which is MongoDB or Mongoose, and we have not configured repository, which is to save or retrieve the case. But now we have configured getting into the route and then calling the function itself that will then call these other files. What we can do is to then import that. So we need to import this particular route into our main file so that we can at least see the path. Okay. So we can say we import the routers here. That's a comment, by the way. Okay, so let's just say const here, and we simply bring in the case router, and we'll say equals require. So let's bring that from source, models, case, and route. Now we have been able to bring in the case router. You see, when I click on that, it's able to bring me to that file, because I just required this, the file from source, modules, case, route. Exactly what I have here. So this is the case router. Of course, we need to use this. So we can simply say right here app.use case router. Let's save that. Let's see if that still works. You see, our application did not crash. If there's an error, our application would definitely crash. If I come back here, remember that is a post. We need to make a post. So this is where we can start, using Postman, because you can't make a post from your browser, at least not from the, surface area here. So we can simply come in here. We're trying to experiment, so we don't need to go into a collection. Let's just create, a request. Let's use the 300 dev days folder we already have, and we can simply call the case. It's a post, and of course we're not sending anything into that post just yet. If I run this, remember it has to be on 5,000. I believe so. I think we have an error, so let's see. Localhost 5,000. Let's go back to our code just to verify everything is fine. Okay, so we have an error, and it says unexpected end of JSON input. Well, yes, because we are putting a JSON when there is no JSON for now. Let's run this again. And you see we have case submitted. So yes, this is working. Now the error is because we made it look like we're expecting a JSON, but we are not requesting for one yet, at least from our code. So right here we have case submitted, and that is what we have in the controller. When this is called, we have case submitted. Let's change that to see what happens. Let's send it as a JSON this time around, and let's also put a code. So I can say res.status. I can set this to 200, and I can say .json, which is the object I want to see. My JSON can say, give me a message of, or probably give me a status of OK, and give me a message of case was received. What in the world? Okay, am I writing? Case was received. So if I call this now, it tells us status, okay, message case was received, and status is set to 200. That shows you how you can basically customize this. I can say 201, save with Control S, come back here, run it again, and I have 201, which means created. Now, these things actually have meanings. The numbers have meanings. And what we are going to do is we'll stop here. Today is Tuesday. How many of you want us to continue for the next 15 minutes? Let me see your messages in the chat. I don't want to take too much of your time. If you want to continue for the next 15 minutes, let me know in the chat. But if you want us to continue next time, probably next week, or if I can arrange for an additional class for you guys later this week, I can also do that. Let me know if you want us to continue for 15 minutes. If I can get 5 people say yes, then yes, we can continue. Let's continue next time. I'm no longer understanding. Okay, I think you have not been in some of the previous classes, if that's the case, because we've already covered some of these things. You are able to create, like a router. You're able to call, the function you have in the controller, right? And then, you're able to make a simple request. Here, we just imported, that particular router, okay? And we decided to use the router here. What we will do, it's fine. I think this is already a lot. I want to go through what we've done so far. Make sure you are in the next class so you don't, miss out on the whole thing. In the next class, we'll continue. Right now, we're building an API, and we have a simple API structure here that we can at least use to send a request and get a response, right? So we send a request by calling this. This is what we just called when we say /case. This is what we called. When we call this, it basically calls the controller, which is this controller, and will respond with case was received, right? Simple. In the next class, what we'll do is we'll proceed to actually send a case with a description, a status, and then we'll send it as JSON. We'll save that case to our database, right? And we'll save that case to the database, and it can be retrieved later, by the application. Okay. So we'll continue with that in the next session. So we don't take too much time. We've covered a lot already. I want you to go back to this recorded material, look through what I've mentioned, try to understand what we're trying to achieve here. We did a lot already, even on this page alone, right? With the explanation, I'm sure this should be good enough for you guys to understand the concepts of APIs, clients, and communication happening between APIs over JSON, over REST, accepting JSON input, right, on both APIs, which is and application A and application B. These are APIs. All right. So thank you very much for joining the session. I'll see you in the next one. Do have a wonderful time. Bye. All right.